and gentlemen, please stand up. Please take your seats. Honored guests from Korea, esteemed colleagues and students, distinguished guests and friends who are following this event by video streaming in the conference room in the Lipsius building. I'm delighted to welcome so many guests today to what is for Leiden the heart of the university, the Academy building. We've gathered here to listen to the public lecture by Mr. Jang, who is in exile from North Korea. His lecture is of immense international public importance, as we can readily see from the large numbers of people present, including press representatives from all over the world. The stained glass windows behind me depicts a portrait of Prince William of Orange, the monarch who founded this university almost 440 years ago. At that time, Leiden had been involved in a struggle to repel the invading Spanish forces, and the city had successfully withstood the long siege. To mark the heroic resistance by the people of Leiden, the prince awarded the city the gift of a university. Given this history, it is not surprising that freedom has always been a guiding principle for our university, and it is reflected in our university motto, Presidium Libertatis, Bastion of Freedom. Freedom is the principle behind Mr. Jang's lecture. Freedom is also an essential prerequisite for democracy. The freedom of citizens to express their opinions, to take decisions independently, and to vote according to their own beliefs and conscience. But freedom can never be simply assumed. The situation in North Korea today bears witness to this. Our more recent history too shows that freedom can never be taken for granted. In November 1940, Rudolf Cleveringa, he was the law dean at the time, demonstrated enormous civic courage by giving a public lecture defending his Jewish colleagues against the Nazis. He delivered his brave speech in this very hall, and immediately afterwards he was arrested and put into prison. Freedom is an imperative for science and scholarship. All of us present here today share the view that universities can only thrive in an atmosphere of freedom. Freedom to carry our research and to teach without interference from rulers, religious codes, or prejudice is vital for progress, for prosperity, and the rule of law. And this unique conference today about the oppressive regime in North Korea and what we can learn from the freed voices emphasizes that notion. I would like to say to our honorable friends who have come to seek freedom outside North Korea, it has taken great courage for you to come here to this bastion of liberty and to participate in this conference. Since regaining your freedom, you have worked silently but tirelessly to promote stability, peace and freedom in your home country. So we consider your presence, Mr. Jang, here as a sign of hope. We are particularly proud and privileged to have you here today as our main speaker. For those of you who are not able to follow a lecture in Korean, a simultaneous translation will be provided, and following the lecture there will be the opportunity to ask questions, and the question session will be moderated by our Humanities Dean, Professor Wim van der Doel. And I would now like to call on Professor Remco Breuker, Professor of Korean Studies, to introduce Mr. Jang. Thank you very much.
Esteemed guests, dear students, it is with pride and a great sense of a feeling of honor and gratitude that I introduce to you Mr. Jang Jin-sung, a poet, a writer, known to you, I think, from his magisterial memoirs, Dear Leader, now translated into English. A tireless opinion maker and activist who asks for our participation in working together to bring more freedom and better lives to North Korean people. He's the founder of New Focus, a large influential internet medium and newspaper, and a speaker on these on issues of freedom and liberty in North Korea. I find it particularly appropriate to see him speak here in Leiden, as our president Karel Stolker said, the bastion of liberty. So I would like to invite Mr. Jang Jin-sung to come up here and to deliver his lecture, which will be interpreted by Shirley Lee. Thank you.
안녕하세요. 저 장진성이라고 합니다. 오늘 이 역사적인 무대에서 이 강연장에서 제가 강의를 할 수 있게 된 것을 제 일생의 가장 큰 영광으로 생각을 합니다.
Hello everyone, my name is Jang Jin-sung. That I'm here on this platform, being able to speak to all of you, I feel it is the greatest honor in my entire lifetime.
오늘 이 높은 자리에 그리고 이 영광의 기회를 제공해 주신 라이덴 대학과 그리고 랭커 교수님 그리고 적극적으로 성원해 주시고 이렇게 지지해 주신 라이덴 시장님께 감사의 인사를 드리고 싶습니다.
I want to say thank you so much to Leiden University for providing this occasion, to Professor Broker for starting this, to the rector of Leiden University, to all of you who have supported this and have made this event possible.
그러면 제가 오늘 강의할 제목은 북한의 물리적 독재와 감성 독재입니다.
The title of my lecture will be Dictatorial Codependence, North Korea's regime of physical controls and mind controls.
지금껏 세계가 알고 있던 북한의 독재는 물리적 독재만 알고 있는데 또 그 부분만을 강조하고 있는데 사실은 북한을 안정적으로 3대 세습까지 유지하게 하는 그 비결은 이 양대 축은 하나는 물리적 독재고 또 다른 하나 독재는 감성 독재입니다.
I want to talk about these two types of controls, physical controls and mind controls, because perhaps until now the world was quite familiar with the physical control mechanisms, the physical oppression and the brute force, but that is not enough to keep a totalitarian system going for so long into a third generation of hereditary succession. And for the stability of that totalitarian control, the emotional and mind control mechanisms are a fundamental pillar to the dictatorial regime of North Korea.
물리적 독재는 주민들에 대한 통제, 구속, 감시를 의미하며 이것을 주관하는 부서가 바로 당 조직 지도부입니다.
The physical control mechanisms that coordinate physical controls over people, whether it's organizational or surveillance or arrests, the entity that oversees the physical control of North Korea's totalitarian system is the Organization and Guidance Department of the Korean Workers' Party.
북한의 감성 독재는 주민들의 정서, 생각, 문화까지도 전체주의로 왜곡하고 수령주의로 유도하는 그런 독재입니다. 이 감성 독재는 노동당 선전선동부가 전담을 하고 있습니다.
The emotional and mind control mechanisms that pervade all consciousness and all individuals in North Korean society, that is overseen by the Propaganda and Agitation Department of the Korean Workers' Party.
그럼 북한이 이 양대 권력이 왜 노동당 조직 지도부와 선전선동부, 다시 말해서 노동당에 집중돼 있는가? 그것은 바로 이 노동당의 절대 수령 유일지도 체제를 주도하는, 그러니까 국가 발전을 위한 정당이 아니라 수령 유일지도 체제를 지키기 위한 정당이기 때문입니다.
The reason why the Organization and Guidance Department and the Propaganda and Agitation Department, the reason why two Workers' Party organs rule over the totalitarian mechanisms of North Korea is because the ruling party of North Korea does not exist to be a government. It exists to control the people in order to serve the supreme leader.
1968년까지 북한의 양대 권력은 당과 내각이었습니다.
Until 1968, North Korea was not like this. North Korea rested on the two pillars of the party and the government and cabinet.
그때는 오히려 경제 발전을 계획 경제를 주도하는 내각의 권위가 더 컸습니다. 그럴 수밖에 없었던 이유가 사회주의 동구권이 있을 때 구소련 공산당의 지도를 받았기 때문에 북한 노동당은 구소련 공산당의 지도를 받는 지옥당 수준으로 밀려나 있었던 겁니다.
At that time, the government and cabinet of North Korea actually had more prestige and influence in North Korea, and because they ran the economy, and at that time, the Workers' Party, the political party of North Korea, was nothing more than a regional branch of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and it did not have the influence it holds today.
그러나 1970년대 초반부터 김정일이가 후계 권력을 시작하면서 60년대 말부터죠. 그렇게 하면서 자기 세습을 정당화하기 위해서, 합법화하기 위해서 내각의 권위를 축소시키고 당의 권위를 부각시키면서 북한을 당 조직 지도부와 선전선동부 이 양대 기둥 위에 올려놓았습니다.
But in the late 60s and early 70s, as Kim Jong-il began to prepare his hereditary succession to the dictatorship, the government began to grow weak, it began to lose influence and power, and in the meantime, the Organization and Guidance Department and the Propaganda and Agitation Department became the two pillars of power through which Kim Jong-il concentrated power into the Korean Workers' Party.
그때 당시에는 김일성이가 당 총비서였고 김정일이는 그 당 총비서를 보좌하는 당 조직 지도부장 겸 비서였습니다. 그러니까 이 당 조직 지도부가 왜 커질 수밖에 없었냐면 바로 김정일이가 이 후계 권력을 아버지 권력보다도 크게 공고화하면서 당 조직 지도부에 북한의 모든 실권이 모이게 됐던 것입니다.
So at the time, Kim Il-sung was the General Secretary of the Korean Workers' Party, which is the highest position in the Workers' Party, and Kim Jong-il was an organizational secretary, and he was supposed to be there to preserve and protect the position of Kim Il-sung, who was General Secretary of the Korean Workers' Party. But in the process of gathering power, such that he could be more powerful than his father, Kim Il-sung, the threads of power and the mechanisms of power became concentrated into the Organization and Guidance Department, of which Kim Jong-il was secretary.
이때부터 북한에서 정치범 수용소가 나오게 되고 국가안전보위부가 생기고 그리고 3대 멸족 연자제가 나오게 됐습니다. 이것은 뭐냐면 수령을 배신할 경우에 정치범 수용소 3대까지 멸족을 시킨다. 그래서 이 완벽한 강력한 물리적 독재가 바로 당 조직 지도부에 의해서 현실화될 수 있었습니다.
So this is also the time at which the political prison camp system, the guilt by association for 3 generations, the idea of a political crime being disobeying the supreme leader, this is when all this came together systematically in order for the supreme leader to be the absolute and unchallengeable authority in North Korea.
한편 김일성 우상화, 개인 우상화를 위해서 당 선전선동부를 최대한 부각을 시켰습니다.
And also, in order to emphasize the authority of the supreme leader, which was Kim Il-sung at the time, the propaganda and agitation department also rose to prominence along with the organization and guidance department because it was responsible for cultifying and eventually deifying the supreme leader.
그때부터 북한은 이념 국가가 돼버렸고 이 이념의 중심은 수령 유일지도 체제가 돼버렸습니다.
And that is when North Korea's ideological system became fixed and it became an ideologically run state, with the ideology being the supreme leader being the ideology of North Korea.
지금껏 세계가 잘못 알고 있었던 북한의 군부가 북한을 통치한다 이렇게 잘못 알고 있었는데 왜 그렇게 이야기하는 분들은 오히려 거꾸로 제가 질문을 합니다. 김정일이가 30년 넘게 당 조직 지도 부장 겸 비서로 있었다는 데 대해서는 잘 인지하지 못하고 있습니다. 그럴 수밖에 없는 것이 당 조직 지도부는 이렇게 내부 실권을 장악하고 보여주는 대외 권력은 군부나 내각이나 이런 부차적인 권력이었던 것입니다.
Even today, a lot of people think the military figures or military influence controls North Korea or has dominance in the North Korean circles, but maybe people should also consider that Kim Jong-il was the director and the secretary of the Organization and Guidance Department for 30 years as he consolidated his hereditary succession and his totalitarian regime. How are we to reconcile that? Because the Organization and Guidance Department is by definition behind the scenes while the military and government institutions appear to run the country.
이 물리적 독재와 감성 독재는 서로 협력하며 상호 공존을 하게 돼 있습니다.
The physical mechanisms of control and the mechanisms of mind control and thought control depend on each other by necessity.
그러면 어떻게 협력하며 그 독재 행위들은 어떻게 이루어지는가에 대해서 조금 좀 설명을 드리도록 하겠습니다.
So I'd like to explain a bit about how in practice these mechanisms interact with each other, the physical mechanism and the mind control mechanisms.
우선 북한의 감성 독재에 대해서 말씀드리겠습니다.
I'd like to begin with the mind control mechanisms of North Korea's totalitarian regime.
북한 문화의 주인공은 김일성, 김정일, 김정은 세 사람뿐입니다.
The only protagonists in any North Korean cultural product is Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, or Kim Jong-un. There can only be 3 main characters in North Korean culture.
이러한 원칙을 지키기 위해서 이론을 만들고 그리고 국가작품심의위원회라는 법적 내규를 만들고 그리고 여기에 종사하는 인력들이 자유적인 창작을 할 수 없도록끔 당 선전선동부 그리고 그 산하에 구속을 시킵니다.
So in order to uphold this system where only Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un can be protagonists of any North Korean story or cultural product, there are entire ideological theories and legal codes created in order to enforce that in the form of the Juche art theory, which functions as a legal code, and also in the form of the National Arts Deliberation Committee, which is the surveillance authority that issues or ratifies whether a cultural product can be deemed as valid, as published, as existent.
북한의 문학, 예술, 모든 분야의 창작은 개인의 영감과 의지로 실천되는 것이 아니라 위에서 설정해주는 주제와 심지어는 형상에 이르기까지 위에서 주는 지령 과학대로 창작을 할 수밖에 없습니다.
No North Korean artist or writer can begin their work of art or cultural product of his or her own accord or inspiration. Every work of art must begin with an order issued through party mechanisms, and then the artist can begin to compose the work. And it is not just the order that is necessary for a work of art to begin to be existent, it's also the shape, the aesthetics, the nature. So you are given these guidelines to follow in order to produce your cultural product.
북한 문화의 감성 독재는 무엇으로부터 시작되냐면 언어의 전체주의, 그리고 그 안에서 언어의 등급별, 그러니까 계층 분류로부터 시작이 됩니다.
A fundamental beginning of mind control and totalitarian thought control in North Korea begins with language, where language becomes the vehicle for apartheid, where there are different registers of language for the supreme leader and every other individual.
수령에게 해당되는 언어가 따로 있고 일반 주민들에게 해당되는 언어가 따로 있습니다.
There is a different lexicon, there is a different language that applies to the supreme leader and that applies to every other North Korean.
제가 그 형상 창작과 관련해서 한 가지 사례를 말씀드려 설명을 드리겠습니다.
I'd like to provide an example of how the guidelines are shaped when a cultural product begins.
북한에 한 유명한 미술가가 있었는데 이분이 그 북한에서는 수령을 아무나 그릴 수 없습니다. 국가에서 지정한 아주 유능한 미술가 화가만이 수령 형상을 할 수가 있습니다.
This is a true story about an artist in North Korea. In North Korea, you may not depict or portray the supreme leader unless you have authorization to do so, and to acquire that permission, you have to be one of the leading artists in the country to be given that privilege of depicting the supreme leader.
북한에서는 수령을 형상할 때 항상 웃는 모습으로 형상을 해야 됩니다.
And also, when anyone depicts or portrays the supreme leader must be smiling.
오늘날 이 화가가 북한에서 300만 대량 아사 기간에 주민들은 굶어 죽고 울상인데 수령만 웃을 수 없다 해서 수령의 근엄한 표정을 그리게 됐습니다.
So this was during the arduous march where up to 3 million North Koreans starved to death, and he thought, well, it just feels a bit out of line, a bit wrong to portray the supreme leader as smiling while so many people are undergoing an arduous march of suffering. So he considered depicting the supreme leader who was not smiling.
그래서 이 1호 창작가라고 하는데 여기에서 권리를 박탈해가지고 수령을 그리는 권한을 박탈해서 일반 주민만 그리게 됐습니다.
So until then, he had been a number one artist, and number one applies to any professional job occupation in North Korea, which pertains directly to the supreme leader. And upon producing a work of art in which the supreme leader was not smiling, he lost his number one right. He couldn't deal with or touch the theme of the supreme leader in his visual art.
수령이 위대해서 북한은 지상 낙원이기 때문에 주민들도 웃는 얼굴만 그리게 되어 있습니다.
So because North Korea is paradise on earth, no matter what is happening, the supreme leader, the people, everyone needs to be smiling.
수령도 시도를 했었는데 주민이라고 시도를 못할 이유가 없다. 그래서 침울한 얼굴을 그렸다가 거기에서도 화가라는 직업을 박탈을 당할 수밖에 없었습니다.
So he thought, okay, perhaps it was too much of a risk to try to depict the supreme leader who was not smiling. So now I've lost my right to depict the supreme leader, but he can still paint ordinary North Koreans, and maybe I will try to depict ordinary North Koreans who are not smiling.
그래서 이분이 그때부터 동물이 얼굴을 그리는 화가가 됐습니다.
and he was stripped of the authorization to portray human beings, and then he was only allowed to paint animals.
근데 그 그림들이 대박이 나서 이분이 돈을 많이 벌게 됐습니다.
But these paintings of his animals became so popular that he actually started making money.
그래서 수령을 그릴 때보다 생활이 더 나아졌다 이 한마디 때문에 끝내는 정치범 수용소로 가게 됐습니다.
And in the end, he got reported for saying that my life as painting animals is more free, and I'm having a better life painting animals than I did have a life painting the Supreme Leader, and the report of that got sent him to a political prison camp for life.
북한은 문화만이 아니라 선전선동부 산하의 언론들도 구속이 되어 있습니다.
It's not just the literary or visual art, it's not just art or cultural products that are restricted and monitored and controlled in this way by the party, it is also media and press.
북한의 가장 핵심적인 언론은 노동신문, 조선중앙통신사, 조선중앙TV입니다.
The three core media outlets in North Korea are the Rodong Shimun, the Korean Central News Agency, and the Korean Central TV Broadcasting.
그 세계 언론이 수령만 선전하다 나니까 재미가 없고 진실이 있을 수가 없습니다.
And because all these outlets are geared towards serving the Supreme Leader's purpose, inevitably it becomes a bit boring because there is no reality left to depict.
제가 방송위원회 다닐 때 한 가지 사례를 말씀드리겠습니다.
This is a true story from when I used to work in the Korean Central Broadcasting Committee when I first started my career.
수령 선전을 잘하는 어느 공장에 취재를 가라 해서 갔더니 그 공장에 화재 사고가 났습니다.
I was sent as an on-site reporter to a factory which was supposed to be doing a lot of good propaganda for the Supreme Leader. But when I arrived as the reporter for the propaganda and agitation department, there was an accident.
그런데 화재 사고 났다고 상부에 알렸더니 그거는 취재하지 말고 김일성, 김정일 선전을 잘하는 그런 모습들만 찍어서 취재를 해오라.
And there was actually like a fire accident, so it was quite bad. But I reported the fact that there was a fire accident going on, and but the orders was well just avoid that bit and just still report on how good the factory is, how well the factory is functioning, how well it is serving the Supreme Leader.
문화와 마찬가지로 언론도 이렇게 지령 취재입니다.
So just like in any form of cultural product, reporting journalism in North Korea is also command and obedience.
언론도 문화도 선전선동부의 획일적 지배하에 있는 이런 나라가 바로 북한입니다.
So the only form of any record, media, press, cultural, visual, the only form of production that can exist validly in North Korea is under the guidance of the propaganda and agitation department. That is how North Korea works.
그러면 북한의 물리적 독재에 대해서 좀 말씀을 드리겠습니다.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the physical control mechanisms in North Korea.
물리적 독재는 우선 주민들에 대한 조직적 통제, 관리로부터 시작이 됩니다.
The fundamental building block of physical control in North Korea is formed on organizational structures and organizational affiliations for each and every North Korean individual, where they are monitored and put under surveillance and and have to report to the institutional structure they are affiliated with.
이를 위해서 주민들이 나이, 성별, 직업, 입당 여부에 따라서 소속 단체들을 만들어 놓고 거기에 분류를 해서 구속을 시킵니다.
So, for example, based on age, gender, background, occupation, all these factors are taken into account to assign you to a certain category of organizational affiliation, and then you have to be affiliated with that organizational entity.
서화는 조선소년단위원회, 청년은 김일성 사회주의 청년동맹, 그리고 비당원은 근로자동맹, 당원은 당위원회 구속을 시킵니다.
For example, like toddlers have to be part of the children's league. The youth have to be part of the youth league. the people who are not members of the Workers' Party have to be part of the Workers' League. Women have to be part of the Chosun Women's League. Party members have to be members of their work league.
그 단계 설정은 단순히 주민들이 성장에 따라서 규정해 놓은 것일 뿐 직업에 따라서도 또 세분화합니다. 가령 예컨대 기자들은 조선기자동맹 중앙위원회, 농민은 조선농업근로자 동맹, 여성은 조선여맹, 작가들은 조선작가동맹 중앙위원회 이렇게 그 소속 단체들을 만들어 놨습니다.
So what the first example I gave is based on a progression throughout life, based on your age or your gender. So there are those big categories of institutional affiliation, but that is not all. There are much smaller categories of institutional affiliation for the type of profession you're involved with. For example, if you are involved with words, you will have to be part of, for example, the Writers' Union or Central Committee, or Women's Workers' Central Committee or Agricultural Workers' League. There is institutional affiliation for everything.
그 중앙기관들은 각 지방에 산하 지부들을 두고 그 안에서 또 당 독립적으로 존재하는 것이 아니라 당위원회의 지도를 받게 되어 있습니다.
But none of these unions or league exist of an independent accord. They are all coordinated from the central headquarters of that league, which operate branches throughout provinces and cities and districts all throughout North Korea. So then none of these entities exist as a separate entity. They are all capillaries of a bigger entity in the central institutions.
그 당위원회 안에서 당 생활을 하는데 조직 생활을 하는데 북한은 일주일에 하루씩 토요일 날이 정치 행사날입니다. 이날에는 모든 주민들이 김일성, 김정일 교육을 받아야 됩니다.
And in the party committees that exist for all these institutional affiliations, there is such a thing called the Day of Politics, the political day, which happens every Saturday in North Korea. And on this day of politics, you have to attend political sessions organized by your party committee for your institutional affiliation.
여기에서 어떤 결과가 왔냐면 북한 주민들은 김일성, 김정일이 혁명 역사와 함께 성장합니다. 유치원 때는 김일성, 김정일이 유년 시절, 좀 청년 성장기 되게 되면 청년 시절, 또 송년이 되게 되면 김일성, 김정일이 혁명 역사를 그 현지 시찰 그런 교육을 받게 되어 있습니다.
And one of the programs on this political Saturday is the education of the correct understanding of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, of which the revolutionary history of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il forms a large part. And all North Korean citizens must grow up with the revolutionary history of Kim Il-sung or Kim Jong-il. So for example, when you're 3 years old, you will hear stories about what Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il did when they were 3. Same with when you're 4, when you're 5, when you're 6. So there is a gradual progressional syllabus of the revolutionary history of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il adapted to every age group and consciousness understanding.
북한의 물리적 독재와 감성 독재 상호 관계를 한마디로 요약한다면 감성 독재에서 세뇌에서 물리적 독재에서 사상 단련을 해서 여기에서 배신으로 글로 떨어질 경우에는 바로 정치범 수용소로 가는 것입니다.
And to give you like a very concrete, specific example of how the physical control mechanisms and the mind control mechanisms exist in codependence and mutual support is the fact that organizationally you are bound to an institutional entity of which participation is compulsory, and within that institutional entity your thoughts will be formed from first consciousness as you are born till the day you die, and you have to take part in this. And if you deviate from the ideological directions, if someone sees that you are not thinking correctly, ultimately the penalty for you is condemned to political prison camp and there's no return.
그러면 이런 물리적 독재, 감성 독재가 과연 아직도 유효한가? 김정은 시대에 와서 과연 계속적으로 성공할 수 있는가에 대해서 좀 짧게 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다.
So I want to talk a bit now about this system where the physical controls and mind controls work in mutual codependence. Is it still working? Is it still working as it should be in Kim Jong-un's day today?
김정은 시대 정권이 성공할 수 있겠는가 하는 것을 알자면 김정일 세습 환경과 비교를 해보면 알 수 있습니다.
One way of thinking about whether Kim Jong-un's system can hold is to compare the conditions surrounding Kim Jong-un's succession to power with that of his father Kim Jong-il.
김정일 세습하던 1970년도 국가 조건을 본다면 그때는 사회주의 종국권이라는 대외성이 있었습니다. 두 번째는 남한에 비해서 경제적으로 우월했던 대내성이 있었습니다. 셋째는 자본주의를 거치지 않고 봉건 왕조에서 김씨 왕조로 바로 비약한 이양된 역사적인 폐쇄성, 이 세 가지가 바로 국가 조건이 충분 조건이었습니다. 김정일 세습 기간.
In the period of Kim Jong-il's succession to power, the conditions surrounding the nation of North Korea was such that the socialist bloc was there. The South Korean economy was actually poorer than North Korea's economy, and also historically, it went from a feudal kind of system, and then it got cemented into a supreme leader system, while isolation was maintained from other types of systems in that process.
그러나 지금의 김정은에게는 사회주의 동국권 우방도 없고 유일한 중국마저 핵폐기 압박을 가하는 형편입니다. 그리고 경제적으로도 이제는 경제 체제가 완전히 붕괴이 돼가지고 남한은 세계 경제 선진국 12개 선진국인데 북한은 하위 179개 그 하위권에 있습니다. 세 번째는 더는 폐쇄적일 수가 없는 게 북한에는 시장이라는 것이 새로운 공간이 생겨났습니다.
If you compare it with the conditions for Kim Jong-un's coming into power, the socialist bloc does not exist anymore. There is China, but China is not very happy with North Korea. In terms of economic conditions, South Korea is ahead of North Korea, and while North Korea remains as one of the most impoverished nations in the entire world, and also this isolation, it cannot hold. It's not sustainable because there is such a thing as marketization that has been seeping into and pervading North Korea.
두 번째는 지도자 조건인데요. 세습에서 가장 유리한 것은 아버지 후광입니다. 정치적 후광입니다. 김정일 때는 김일성의 지위가 아주 절대적이었고, 두 번째는 그 세습 훈련 시간이 굉장히 길었습니다. 그리고 세 번째는 그 충분한 시간 속에서 자기 동창생들로 당 조직 지도부를 구성하고 그것으로 아버지 권력을 빼앗아 올 만큼의 파워를 가질 수 있었던 권력 경험이 있었습니다.
The second standard of comparison I'm going to talk about is your predecessor, because in a hereditary succession, your predecessor matters. And in terms of Kim Jong-il, he had the aura of Kim Il-sung to legitimize his succession. In terms of
두 번째는 세습 훈련 시간이
and secondly, Kim Jong-il had decades of experience and learning the ropes of the system in order to prepare for his power.
그러나 김정은에게는 아버지 김정일도 엉망이고, 두 번째는 김정일이는 30년 넘게 세습 시간이 길었지만 김정은은 고작 3년밖에 안 됩니다. 그리고 아버지 김정일에게는 자기 김일성 종합대학 동창생들로 당 조직 지도부를 구성할 수 있었지만 지금의 김정은의 동지들은 스위스 외국인들입니다. 그러니까 김정은의 당 조직 지도부가 없는 겁니다.
And if you look now at Kim Jong-un's hereditary succession, while Kim Jong-il had the aura of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un has Kim Jong-il, who is a failed leader, not very popular, and also he had 3 years compared to his father's 30 years of experience and learning how the system works. And finally, Kim Jong-il's organization and guidance department was strengthened and formed with his classmates from Kim Il-sung University. They are his colleagues, they are his political allies, they are his old friends. If Kim Jong-un has friends and allies, he went to school in Switzerland, maybe they're abroad. Within the country, he has no political allies, he has no friends he can trust yet.
셋째는 사회 조건 및 주민 조건인데, 김정일 때는 완벽한 배급제가 살아 있었고, 그리고 그 배급제 안에서 북한 주민들에게 그 복종을 강요할 수 있었던 권력 자신감이 있었고, 정권 자신감이 있었고, 세 번째로는 그 주민들이 우민화 정책을 실천할 수 있는 그런 폐쇄화가 가능했습니다. 그러나 오늘날 김정은이는 주민들은 시장의 충성 가치보다도 물질 가치에 다 세뇌된 그런 주민들입니다.
Also, the third standard of comparison I will use between Kim Jong-il's succession and Kim Jong-un's succession is the people, how they have changed since then. When Kim Jong-il came into power, the public distribution system, which caters for all North Korean citizens through rations of all survival needs, that was intact. But that collapsed during the 90s. And when Kim Jong-un came to power, the public distribution system does not exist anymore. So in terms of the kind of the basic order of things, the dynamics of command and obedience, the command and obedience got you going, it got you fed, it got you promoted. That has been messed up because of market forces. The dynamics have changed.
이 시장이 주민들을 어떻게 변화시켰냐면 충성 가치만 알고 있었는데 물질 가치를 확산시킨 겁니다.
So what the markets have in effect done is before the most valuable thing for a North Korean was the value of loyalty, was how loyal you were to the system was what got you ahead. That alone got you ahead. But now with the rise of marketization in North Korea, it's been messed up. The value of something else has come in. The value of your earnings, your work, something is changing.
북한에서 배급은 어떤 의미냐면 전체주의를 강요하는 통제 시스템인데 지금 이게 붕괴되니까 기관에서 이탈해서 주민들이 시장으로 빠져나가고 그래서 정권의 통제를 초월하는 시장의 확대가 지금 이어지고 있습니다.
So what is happening is with the public distribution system, that was another layer of control was the food, the shelter, the survival needs. And with the collapse of the public distribution system, many people fled their institutional structures, not necessarily fled, but they escaped it. They weren't totally controlled by it. They weren't totally living with it. They started trading outside of their structures. They started smuggling. They started doing activities that were not institutionally bound. And those things are increasing by the day, that their lives are being led increasingly outside the institutions, no matter how much the institutions continue to demand enforcement.
결국은 물리적 독재가 붕괴되는 것이죠.
Basically, it's the collapse of the physical control mechanisms, the beginnings of that.
또 시장에서 남보다 가격 우위를 차지하기 위해서 가격 경쟁에서 선점을 차지하기 위해서 북한 주민들은 외부 정보를 스스로 찾게 됩니다. 라디오를 듣고 그리고 이렇게 인터넷을 외부 그 출장자들을 통해서 입속말로도 이렇게 정보를 찾게 됩니다.
And the other thing is not just the physical control mechanisms. People know from experience that information is money in a market economy. If you have the rice prices before someone else, you will make more profit. If you know something is going to affect something, you will make more profit. So people naturally seek information from outside the state-controlled channels, for example, through smugglers' channels, through officials stationed overseas in China, business officials, diplomatic officials. These become channels that are beyond the control of the regime.
결국은 이 과정을 통해서 감성 독재도 붕괴되는 것입니다.
And this is the collapse of the mind control mechanisms.
제가 예상하건대 감히 예상해 보건대 북한 정권의 붕괴는 5년, 아무리 늦어도 7년 안에는 뭔가 붕괴가 있을 것으로 보입니다. 그래서 저는 북한에 투자하는 사람들에게 꼭 이런 말을 합니다. 김정은 정권에 투자하지 말고 북한 붕괴에 투자하라 이런 말을.
So I don't want to be like a soothsayer or anything, but I'd like to say, in my opinion, I don't think the collapse of this regime is very far. 5 years at maximum, if you really stretch it, 7 years. This configuration is already collapsing. It is going to collapse. And so I'd like to say to everyone, don't invest in upholding Kim Jong-un's regime. Invest in the breakdown of Kim Jong-un's regime, i.e. invest in North Korea.
멀지 않아 라이덴 대학 졸업생들이 북한에 가서 교수가 될 날이 있을 걸로 믿고 있습니다.
I trust that students from Leiden University will be able to teach universities in North Korea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jang, for this wonderful lecture and this very important view from inside North Korea. I think this is very valuable. My name is Wim van den Doel. Doesn't work? My name is Wim van den Doel. I'm the dean. I'm a very proud dean, actually, of a Faculty of Humanities, which hosts a very thriving Korean Studies program. Just a little advertisement in between. There's some time for questions, and there's, I hope answers to those questions. So if one wants to ask a question, please raise your hand. I know there's already one question here on my left. So who wants to ask the first question?
All right. First, my name. Okay. My name is Roderick Kelder, and I had a question about the basically the famine in North Korea and the dissolution of the public distribution system. Insofar as that, you just mentioned that the dissolution of the system means both a breakdown in a control of the party because they are no longer providing goods, food to people, and thus they lose pull on people's lives. But furthermore, it also means a breakdown in ideological control, as indeed people are no longer depending on the Kim dynasty, but more on their own abilities to make money and provide for themselves. So I was wondering, how does a cultural department like the United Front Department, of which you were a member before, deal with this ideological and political crisis? Do you try to spin it? Do you try to give it a positive twist? Do you try to suppress these developments?
김일성 사후에 북한 정권이 성군 정치를 발표를 했는데 이것은 그 본질이 뭐냐면 군을 앞세워서 계엄 통치를 하겠다는 것입니다.
After Kim Il-sung's death and Kim Jong-il's rule began, the military first policy was announced in North Korea that was nothing really other than the fact that martial law was declared in North Korea.
북한의 노래를 제가 사례로 설명을 드리겠는데요. 북한의 그 유행가라고 하죠. 북한의 무슨 모든 유행가는 다 뭐 정치적인 가요이니까 뭐 유행가라고도 할 것도 없는데 과거에는 북한 노래가 공산주의 언덕이 저기 보인다 하고 그렇게 노래를 했어요. 그게 시대의 명곡으로 돼 있었는데 오늘날의 시대의 명곡은 뭐냐면 사회주의 지키세요. 이게 바로 북한의 명곡의 그 진화 과정입니다.
So I'll give you one example to show how the propaganda mechanisms adapt. Is in the past maybe there was a really popular song, and maybe you cannot call it a popular song because all popular songs are political songs, but there was a popular political song which was about there on the close hill is communism waiting for us, and then the popular political song changed to become about socialism. So the propaganda adapts with the times.
북한 정권의 선전이 본의 아니게 계속 후퇴하는 겁니다.
So actually what you are witnessing is the North Korean propaganda and mind control retreating. They are losing ground, they are responding, they are ceding to the realities happening inside the country and outside the country.
어떻게 그 알 수 있는가에 대해서는 너무 할 얘기가 많기 때문에 이 정도 사례로 말씀드립니다.
Maybe I'll finish with that example, but I can talk forever about how things are changing.
Anyone over there? Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Victoria Tan. 먼저 한국말로 하고 그 다음에 영어로 번역하겠습니다. 이제 그 북한 정권이 좀 들려요? 얼마 동안 오랫동안 이제 안 간다고 않다고 생각하신다고 말씀하셨는데 그래서 제가 물어보려고 하는 것은 북한 정원이 없어지는 과정, 없어지는 그런 형태 어떤 과정인지 어떤 형태인지 어떻게 생각하시는지 이제 궁금했습니다. So I asked how will, in the opinion of Mr. Chang, how he thinks the North Korean regime will collapse, in which form and what kind of process he thinks it might be.
북한 정권은 벌써부터 그 권력의 내부 모순과 갈등을 보여줬습니다. 그 대표적인 사건이 바로 장성택 처형 사건입니다.
There has already been many visible examples of friction and tension within the power structures of North Korea. One of the prime examples of that is the purge and execution of Jang Song-taek, the uncle of Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un.
김정일 때에도 장성택은 그 권력을 견제하기 위해서 당 조직 지도부가 2번의 혁명화 처벌을 했지만은 감히 공개적으로 하지 못했어요. 왜냐하면 수령 일가의 흠집이 될 수 있기 때문에 최소한 내부적으로만 은밀히 견제를 했었습니다.
Even during Kim Jong-il's time, Jang Song-taek was monitored by the Organization and Guidance Department in order to curb potential power growth. And in this process of monitoring, he was actually sent for revolutionary re-education. It's like not prison, like a labor, for 2 times by the Organization and Guidance Department in order to cut his power down when it grew too strong. But they had to do this secretly and internally, not publicly or announced, because it would harm the prestige of the Supreme Leader's ultimate power and on infallibility and absolute strength.
그러나 오늘날의 당 조직 지도부는 수령 신격화 따위는 돌보지 않고 수령 일가에 김정은의 고모부를 전체 주민의 공개적으로 약간 반당 반혁명이라는 그런 감투를 씌워서 직결 처형을 했습니다.
But the entity that killed and that condemned and killed Jang Song-taek, it didn't take that Supreme Leader's infallibility into account in its decision to purge and execute Jang Song-taek. Not only did they do that publicly, they actually deliberately used propaganda mechanisms all over the country to rouse and incite anger towards Jang Song-taek from the North Korean people. They went above and beyond harming the prestige of the Supreme Leader.
그러니까 장성택 숙청으로 지금 북한 권력층은 잠시 평온을 찾았지만은 북한 정권은 그 평온이 곧 적입니다. 뭔가 항상 들끓어야 되고 적이 있어야 되고 싸울 대상이 있어야 되고 숙청을 해야 되고 그러니까 이제부터의 싸움은 바로 분파 싸움 장성택과 당조직 지도부와의 싸움이 아니라 그 장성택을 제거하는데 결석했던 이 공동체 안에서 갈등이 생겨서 그것이 결국은 북한 정권을 흔드는 중대 계기가 될 것으로 그렇게 보입니다.
So Jang Song-taek was removed under anti-party and anti-revolutionary, anti-factional crimes, and with the removal of Jang Song-taek, there's calm and a semblance of calm and stability within the power's elite because they had to get together in order to make this happen. But in North Korea, whenever something is calm, something's not working because North Korea remains stable because someone kills someone or someone gets rid of someone. That's how the stability is maintained in North Korea. So with the removal of Jang Song-taek, things may look calm, but that means that something will happen because these people who came together to remove Jang Song-taek, they're not necessarily in the same boat.
더구나 김정일 생전 때에는 강력한 리더십으로 북한 간부들이 충성 이권 경쟁만 했었는데 이제는 그 리더십이 실종된 이상 충성 이권보다도 시장 이권을 더 챙기게 됐고 바로 그 안에서 치열한 그 권력 투쟁과 분파가 생길 것으로 보입니다.
And also, when Kim Jong-il was alive, the factional battles, if you could call it that, the struggles between people of influence was to show more loyalty to Kim Jong-il. Because the closer you were to Kim Jong-il, the more trust Kim Jong-il put in you, the more powerful you were. That was the source of your power and influence. But now, where is that source of power and influence? People see influence in trade rights or business rights. So there is no centrally coordinated source of influence that everyone is fighting for. There are many potential sources of power and influence, and in that, there will be fights, there will be arguments, and there will be instability.
First, we have a question over here, and we already have one there. So,
is it working? Okay, great. My name is Maaike de Vries. My question is about, well, actually, you've been talking about how mind control starts from a very early age on, and I am wondering, because we've been talking about artists, people who have been working for and I am actually wondering how creative endeavors and creativity are stimulated from an early age on. How does this work? How do they teach you in elementary school and high school how to conform to the rules of art?
저희 문학 스승은 그 음악대학도 김일성 종합대학도 아니고 바이런 시선이었어요.
My artistic guide was not music school, was not North Korean artist, it was actually Lord Byron.
저는 바이런 시선을 보면서 한국말을 처음 배우는 느낌이었어요. 그 바이런 시선이 한국말 사전 같았어요.
When I read Byron in the Korean translation for the first time, it was literally learning a new language. I considered it a dictionary for me, the translated book of Byron's poetry.
왜냐하면 그 바이런 시선 속에는 언어의 차별도, 언어의 계층도 없었습니다.
Not least because within that dictionary of New Korean, there was no linguistic apartheid, there were no social distinctions or class distinction in language.
바이런 시선을 보기 전까지는 앞으로 훌륭한 충신이 되겠다. 뭐 이런 세뇌의 교육 그 영향으로 인한 그런 생각만 했었는데 바이런 시선을 보고 나서는 해적 그 서사시 해적 주인공처럼 누군가를 사랑하고 싶었고 그 사랑을 위해서 자살도 하고 싶었어요.
Until I encountered Byron's poetry, I was really loyal. I really wanted to be like a perfect loyal servant, to serve the leader, die for this leader. That was really cool. That was what I wanted to do. But when I read Byron, especially The Corsair, that was my favorite. And it's like my priorities began to change. I thought, oh, it's kind of really exciting to love a woman more than the leader. I even considered dying for a woman I was in love with.
심지어는 바이런처럼 절름발이가 되고 싶었습니다.
I even wanted to get a limp like Byron.
이런 꿈과 희망이 있어서 그때부터 문학 공부를 했는데 나중에 김정일이가 서사시를 보고도 아주 시우들이 자유분방하고 좋았다고 해서 결국은 그 수령문학의 종사자로 근무하다가 그 수령문학에서 탈퇴해서 이렇게 자유세계로 올 수 있었어요.
So that's what inspired me, planted me the dream, ironically, to want to be a writer. So then I started studying literature in North Korea and eventually went on to serve as one of the poet laureates of Kim Jong-il. And funnily enough, he said of my poetry, oh, this guy's language is like really out of line, it's kind of all over the place. And so with that, I became a loyal servant of the Supreme Leader. And now I've escaped from the system of the Supreme Leader, and I'm here today.
questions? Yes.
My name is Jos van Aken. I know you don't want to be a soothsayer, but if it's really like that the system within 5 or 7 years is collapsing, what would be the main problem afterwards? Also considering maybe the role of China.
많은 학자, 특히 남한의 학자들이 북한이 붕괴됐을 때 돈이 과연 얼마나 들어가겠냐 이런 물리적 계산만 합니다. 다시 말해서 눈에 보이는 통일만 계산합니다.
A lot of North Korea experts, especially inside South Korea, they think of when it collapses, who will take the burden financially, economically, physically. They only think about these kind of physically visible costs of collapse, unification, reconfiguration. It's always like a cost analysis.
그러나 그것보다 더 큰 걱정은 뭐냐면 바로 눈에 안 보이는 통일, 정서적 통일입니다. 북한 주민들이 인민성을 어떻게 자유민주주의 국민성으로 바꾸는가 이것이 바로 통일의 가장 큰 넘어야 될 숙제입니다.
But if these experts want to study or consider contemplate unification, there are things way more fatal and important and crucially urgent than the economic costs, which is the mental costs. Because how are we going to get these people adapted to enjoy freedom, to even think it's a right? No one is thinking about those kinds of costs. If you want unification, you need to think about psychological unification, not just economic unification.
미국이 이라크를 군사적으로 점령하고도 아직도 거기에 평화가 오지 않는 것은 바로 그 체제에서 살고 있는 그 국민성을 먹고 왔기 때문입니다.
I think when Iraq was invaded and then the US forces came in, and the reason why there was such disaster and chaos was because the kind of psychological Iraq, the kind of sense of Iraq is what it means to be an Iraqi, that wasn't considered.
I'm Adam Cathcart. I have a question about who is in control of the history of Kim Jong-il today? Who is allowed to access archives? I know you had at one time were working on Kim Jong-il's life history and things like that. So I want to know who is in control. How many people are working on the life of Kim Jong-il and particularly looking at his youth? You mentioned the 1960s as a breaking point. Who is allowed to look back that far, and what documents do they have?
북한은 수령주의, 그 수령 두 사람만을 위해서, 김일성, 김정일 두 사람만을 위해서 과도한 인력이 정말 전체 주민이라고 해도 과언이 아닐 만큼 그렇게 그 많은 동원이 있었습니다. 그 동원과 또 그 안에서 이루어졌던 경험들, 이것들이 자연스럽게 그냥 흘러오게 돼 있어요. 아까도 세미나 시간에서 이야기했지만 김정은에서 김여정으로 바뀌든 뭐 죽었던 장성택이가 다시 살아나서 수령이 되든 북한 체제가 변하지 않는 것은 그 시스템이 때문이거든요. 그러니까 이 시스템이 지금 그대로 작동돼서 흘러오는 겁니다. 북한의 사진들을 보게 되면 김정은이가 뭐 장군들을 그 지도하는 이런 사진들은 선전선동부 조직 지도부 그 경험만으로 얼마든지 기획하고 연출할 수 있는 겁니다.
It would not be an exaggeration to say all North Koreans have been mobilized in the history of North Korea for the purpose of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. That is not going to change overnight. That is still there. And all the structures are there, all the mindset is there, all the psychology is there. That can just go on, you know, without effort. But also, I was saying in the conference, or someone was saying earlier in the conference today, that you know, Kim Jong-un can go, he can be killed. Someone in North Korea can get rid of him. They'll just put, you know, his sister Kim Yo-jong in place. It's not him that's holding this together at the moment. It's the systems and structures that are holding together. And for example, when you see like Kim Jong-un looking like really scary, and you know, he's ordering people around and humiliating people, and he's so central and authoritative in pictures in North Korean state media. But these people have, the people who coordinate these sets, pieces, and photographs, they've done this for over half a century. They know what they're doing. They know what effect they need to produce with their pictures. They're not stupid. They're not doing this randomly. They're doing specific set pieces. Whatever Kim Jong-un is not what he really is.
3대 세습은 3대 악습입니다. 어떤 변화도 있어서는 안 됩니다. 통제 시스템도 변해서는 안 되고 주민도 변해서는 안 되고 심지어 수령도 변해서는 안 됩니다. 김정은이가 김일성처럼 헤어 스타일하고 김정은이는 김일성, 김정일로부터 살도 비만도 계승을 했습니다.
The 3 generations of a hereditary dictatorial succession requires continuity, requires non-change, requires for the system not to reform, not to open. It requires maintenance of current structural configurations, and even the supreme leader cannot change. You know, Kim Jong-un didn't just inherit the supreme leader; he also inherited the fat of Kim Il-sung. He needs to. Nothing can change if this configuration is to remain.
There's a question over here.
Good morning, my name is Nicolas Lévy. I got a question which is related to the Kim family. In the 70s, we used to say that we had 2 branches in the Kim family. The main, dealing with the children of the first official wife of Kim Il-sung, and a side branch managed by Kim Song-ge, so the next wife of Kim Il-sung. As of today, we say that one of the sons of Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-nam, is in a profound conflict with Kim Jong-un. But my question is related to other members of the family, those who are considered as side branches members, those who are living in Poland, in Austria, in China, and in other countries. What is your opinion about it? I mean, these people are still considered as side branches members, or they are part of the main branch of the family of the Kim?
사실은 장성택도 격가지였죠. 그래서 당조직 지도부와 장성택은 평생 싸웠고 그 싸움이 2013년에 와서는 장성택이 즉결처형 완패로 끝나게 됐습니다.
Jang Sung-taek too was a side branch of the Kim family. All throughout his career, him and OGD were at total loggerheads because OGD is the enforcer of the side branch and Jang Sung-taek is a side branch, and that tension finally ended with the immediate execution order for Jang Sung-taek in 2013.
일각에서는 김정은이 동생 김여정이가 고위 간부가 됐다고 해서 김정은이가 권력을 잡았다고 이야기를 해요.
Like some people seem to say or think that, for example, you see like Kim Yo-jong, the sister of Kim Jong-un, becoming a high official or appearing in photos, and people think that is Kim Jong-un consolidating his power.
김정일 때에도 김경희는 격가지였어요. 아무런 의미도 없었습니다.
Even Kim Kyung-hee, Kim Jong-il's wife, was a side branch. She had no power of her own.
그러나 오늘날 당 조직 지도부는 오히려 격가지를 길러내야 될, 은근슬쩍 길러내야 될 형편에 있습니다.
But the OGD is at a situation where it's like you kind of need to start growing side branches that were like hidden and cut off.
왜냐하면 수령이 늘 있어야지 저희들이 권력 명분이 있기 때문입니다.
Because you need a supreme leader in the name of the Kim family for the OGD to maintain the current configuration of power.
Question.
Hi, my name is Juliet. We know that the propaganda educational department brings images to the outside world. I was wondering how you think we should interpret these images in order to make sure that the misunderstandings around North Korea are more limited so that we all have a good understanding.
북한의 그 대외적인 사진들은 사실은 분석할 뭐라고 할까요? 그 당 조직 지도부 안에 있는 15가라는 데서 다 검증을 하고 편집을 해서 내보내는 것들입니다.
In terms of interpreting propaganda materials released that are available to the outside world, you can't really begin to see any meaning in them before you first know that Section 15 of the OGD, of the Organization and Guidance Department, vets every single item that is available to the public world.
제가 방송위원회에 있을 때 그 김정일 현지 시찰 동영상, 그때는 96년까지는 동영상으로 뉴스를 전했습니다. 그런데 어느 날 갑자기 김정일이가 그 동영상 속에 노출돼선 안 될 경호원 얼굴이 나왔다. 그러니까 이제부터 사진으로 편집해서 내보내도록 하라 해가지고 오늘날의 김정은 현지 시찰에는 김정일 때에도 마찬가지지만은 기자들이 따라갈 수 없습니다. 당 조직 지도부 안에 있는 선전선동부 안에 용화문원가, 그리고 당 조직 지도부 15호실 사람들이 가서 찍어서 언론사에 나눠주게 돼 있지, 특별히 다 검증을 하고 노동신문사 기자가 찾아가고 이럴 수가 없는 겁니다.
Even when I was there, this was about 96, they still had the film crew with the Kim Jong-il's on-site inspections, but he got really angry once because he said, oh, why is there a face of one of my bodyguards? His face should not be in anything. So then they immediately stopped doing that and they started doing photographs instead as visual evidence of on-site guidance. And also now you need to realize that you don't ever have, there's no such thing as a reporter or journalist. You don't have even like PADP propaganda people on-site guidance. These are staged. These are only done for OGD Section 5 vetting purposes. These are not like on-site guidances that are then reported by journalists. It doesn't work like that. These are prepared in order to produce shots for the outside world.
There's still room for questions. I've seen, now I see many more questions. I thought I saw 4, but now I'm counting already 6. But first one was over there.
Thank you so much for Mr. Jang's speech. My name is Joseph Choi, and I would like to hear your perspectives and opinions in terms of foreign investment and humanitarian aid to North Korea, because some people think that it's not really practical and useful to helping the North Korea, because all the money actually the international community just invested, actually the money also transferred to Kim's family's pocket. But others think that at the same time, even though it might be, or it is, but it is still useful to do so, because we sometimes need to take carrot and the stick approaches. So I would like to hear your perspectives and opinions about this matter.
저는 그 북한에 대한 지원은, 의약품 지원은 절대적으로 찬성을 합니다.
I support fully and absolutely medical types of aid to like medicine to North Korea aid.
그리고 북한 주민들, 북한 내부에 있는 사람들을 자유세계로 데리고 와서 교육을 주거나 이런 프로그램들도 저는 찬성을 합니다.
And I also fully support types of engagement where North Koreans are taken out of the system and put into a foreign environment, for example with education.
김대중 노무현 정부 기간에 그 한국 정부가 햇볕 정책을 하면서 8조 원을 북한에 그 지원을 했습니다.
조각 공이 몇 개죠? 조각 공이 몇 개죠?
그 80억 달러 정도.
80억?
예.
80. Okay. So during Sunshine Policy time in the Romulan administration, the previous administration of South Korea during Sunshine Policy, they gave $8 billion dollars worth of aid to North Korean regime.
그때 당시 대북 정책은 햇볕 정책이었어요. 그 서버에 나오는 그 햇볕을 쬐면 더워서 외투를 벗게 만든다. 한마디로 돈을 지원해주고 돈맛을 알게 해서 북한의 폐쇄를 벗겨버린다. 이것이 바로 햇볕 정책이었습니다.
So like the underlying policy, or the logic of Sunshine Policy rather, was that it's like, you know, in the Aesop's fable, if you like really shine on someone, it's like they'll take their coat off because you're shining on them. So, you know, if you give them all this money, it's like, why won't they want to open up? Of course, they'll gradually open up or want to reform. This will cause them to think, you know, want to change things. So that was the logic, give endlessly so that we're not stopping them from opening up.
그런데 결과는 어떻게 됐냐면 김정일에게만 햇볕이었고 주민들에겐 그늘이었습니다.
But the result of that was it was shining on Kim Jong-il's power alone, while the people were continued to be oppressed in no different way.
그러니까 저는 지금 이때까지 정권을 상대로 북한 정권을 상대로 대북 정책들을 기획하고 그렇게 했었는데 이제는 정권과 주민을 분리시켜 가지고 그렇게 그 대응하는 그런 대북 정책들이 좀 필요하다. 그래서 그런 정책들이 만약 실행될 경우에는 북한이 정권이 더 빨리 붕괴되지 않겠냐 이렇게 생각하시면 됩니다. 북한 정권은 절대 위로부터 변하지 않습니다. 아래로부터의 압력에 의해서 변하는 겁니다.
In basically what Sunshine did was it looked only at the regime as a possibility of open or reforming, while neglecting everything else. And what I would really wish for the world to start thinking about is North Korea policy, North Korea approaches, North Korea thoughts that start to look beyond the regime, look at the people, look at the dynamics, look at other ways of impacting things, because North Korea does not change with the will of the regime, with the real. North Korea cannot reform or open by the will or volition of the power elite. It will only open and reform or collapse. The configuration can only change because there is force from below that makes them need to change policies.
We are approaching the end, but there are a few pressing questions still. So, please, your name first.
Hello, my name is Saiko, and thank you very much for your precious and meaningful lecture. I have a question regarding the execution of Chan Son-taek and the relation with the abductee issue, because North Korea also have an abductee issue, and most of them are from South Korea, but also from Japan. And this year, finally, like after the long years negation, the North Korean side admitted that they did this abductee, and then they decided to talk together with the Japanese government side. And I heard from one source that actually with this research, North Korea approached to the Japanese government they are prepared to do a research because after the execution of Chan Son-taek, who had a strong connection with China, their relation with China became worse. So they felt more isolated, so they wanted to reduce friction, at least with Japan, by solving, or at least showing the attitude that they are planning to solve this issue. Do you think it's true? And if it's not true, do you have any idea why this now, after so many years, they admitted that they did it? And also, is the relation between China and North Korea changed before the execution and after the execution of Chan Son-taek?
지금 북한은 미국을 상대로는 북핵 정치를 하고 있고 남한을 상대로는 NLL 정치를 하고 있습니다. 일본을 상대로는 이 납치 문제에 걸려 있어서 그 협상을 하는데 북핵이든 납치 문제든 그 다음에 군사적 대결이든 그 정권이 붕괴돼야 해결되지. 그 정권이 만들어낸 비극이기 때문에 또 그들이 주도하는 것이기 때문에 정권 붕괴가 안 되는 이상 해결될 수 없다고 봅니다.
It's a bit like the nuclear issue between North Korea and the US, or the NLL, the Northern Limit Line, the sea border between the North and South Korea, or the kidnapping issue between North Korea and Japan. These are the topics of dialogue and negotiation between North and US, or North and Japan, or North and South Korea. But these are issues that were created in order to create fronts for negotiation. Those are issues that cannot be resolved unless the regime changes, regime configuration goes.
One lady over here really wants to ask a question for some time.
My name is Bianca, and I was thinking that you're the very proof that propaganda actually doesn't work so well. And I was wondering, how does someone move from writing poems to the leader to actually deciding to leave the country? And how does that happen? Could you share this with anybody? What happened, actually?
저는 그 김정일 만나기 전까지는 김정일이가 오줌똥도 안 싸는 사람인 줄 알았어요. 그런데 그 완벽한 세뇌가 오히려 문제였던 거죠. 정작 김정일을 만나보니까 너무 그냥 그 모든 것이 다 이렇게 안 좋아 보이는 겁니다.
Until the day I met Kim Jong-il in person, I really thought he didn't go to the toilet. He didn't need to use the toilet. I really believed he was like more holy, divine. But because he was so divine in how I was taught, when I met him, it shattered because he was so divine, because it didn't match. The dissonance was too great for me.
북한이 왜 개혁 개방을 못하냐면 그런 완벽한 신격화 선전을 했는데 그게 들통나는 순간 모든 그 체제 자체가 붕괴되는 겁니다. 그래서 저는 오히려 그것이 도구로 돼서 돌아올 것이다 이렇게 생각합니다.
Without basically the North Korean regime, it cannot reform or open because the facade will shatter so quickly. It will collapse immediately if they open. Like it's just because their power is based on upholding the supreme leader. Once that infallibility, once the lie is exposed, they're gone, and that's why they cannot reform or open of their will or volition. And basically, what's going to happen is this supreme cult and divinity is coming. It's the poison.
There's a question over here.
James Person from the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. Your book, Dear Leader, gave me great hope as a historian because you mentioned working in the archives. Up to now, we've been forced to rely on the materials of the diplomatic record of North Korea's allies, former and present communist allies, to write North Korean history. And there are, of course, many limitations to this. There are gaps in the record. The North Korean government did a very good job of keeping even their allies in isolation. So my question is, how intact are the archives? If your prediction comes true, that the regime collapses in the next 5-7 years, what do you think the chances are of the archives being destroyed? Or will they be available to us after?
제가 김저실록 그 편찬자에 있으면서 저도 의외로 놀랐던 게 상당 부분 자료들을 갖고 있습니다.
Myself, I was really surprised when I began work as the Kim Dynasty Annals, as we called it. It was the history of the Kim family based on real I was really, really surprised at how intact the archives were.
그러니까 그 자료를 보게 될 날도 멀지 않았다고 생각합니다. 제가 이제부터 알파벳 용어를 배워서 용어로 일장 연설을 하는 것보다 더 쉬운 게 북한 공개입니다.
I really think I think I will be able to see those archives again, and before I can learn enough English to read one page of my speech, I think the collapse of this regime is much easier than me learning to read a page of English.
We have a final question.
Hi, I'm Chris Green. On the 14th of September 1991, one of the other speakers at this event, Mr. Ko Yong-hwan, held a press conference at Press Center in Seoul in which he said, "The North Korean regime cannot last for more than 5 years." Some 23 years later, we stand here and Mr. Jang has told us the same thing, citing in part, as evidence of this, instability within the ruling elite in the country. Yet within some of the literature on competitive authoritarianism and dictatorship, it is suggested that, for want of a better phrase, divide and conquer is a good way for a leader to sustain his own power, because everybody underneath him is unstable simultaneously. So what is it that makes Mr. Jang so certain that this time, unlike 1991, we're facing a different situation?
김일성이가 사망했을 때 북한은 곧 붕괴될 것이다 이렇게 이야기를 했습니다. 왜 붕괴 안 됐냐면 김일성이는 상징적인 지도자였어요. 아무 실권을 갖고 있지 못했습니다. 이 김정일이가 당 조직 지도부를 통해서 모든 실권을 이미 1970년대 말 그때부터 장악을 하고 있었기 때문에 상징적인 수령이 사망해도 실권의 지도자가 그 실권 통치가 그대로 이어올 수 있었던 겁니다.
When Kim Il-sung died, people thought, when Kim Il-sung dies, it's going to be unstable, it's going to collapse. People predicted that, but it didn't, obviously, because that wasn't where the power was at. Power was already with Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il had already had stability of power configured long before Kim Il-sung's death. The symbol was dead, but nothing changed in the original power system when Kim Il-sung died.
그러나 이제는 상황이 역전됐습니다. 오늘날의 김정은이가 과거 김일성처럼 상징적인 수령이고 실권 지도자에서 실권 그룹으로 바뀌었습니다.
So it's kind of the opposite situation at the moment. Kim Jong-un, the current supreme leader, while Kim Jong-il was the actual power, Kim Jong-un is the symbolic supreme leader, and now he doesn't hold actual power the way Kim Jong-il did. It's a group who holds actual powers.
이 실권 그룹이 다수가 모였을 때 반드시 그 안에서 이해관계, 그 어떤 생각의 차이나 그리고 정책의 차이 이런 것들이 표출될 수밖에 없습니다.
When that power elite group comes to make a decision in consensus, it is inevitable that they will not think alike, that there will be disagreements in policy, in thoughts, in interpretations, and those things will manifest themselves.
그 첫 증거, 엄청난 증거가 바로 장성택 처형인데 이게 뭐냐면 감히 수령 일가에서도 역적이 나오고 즉결 처형을 한다 하는 것을 보여준 이거 엄청난 사건이거든요.
Unlike in the manifestation of anomaly of something. It's sudden. It's not designed. It's a change that is unintended. There is no better example of that than the execution of the supreme leader's own uncle. It's no one planned this.
그게 바로 김일성 사후 김정일 정권이 잡았을 때와 오늘날 2대 세습과 3대 세습의 큰 차이입니다.
And that is the big difference between Kim Il-sung's death into Kim Jong-il's era and Kim Jong-il's death into Kim Jong-un's era.
또 한 가지가 뭐냐면 이번에 강석주 국제비서가 유럽을 순방했는데 김정일 때에는 어느 한 일개 간부가 그렇게 순방을 할 수가 없었어요.
And another sign of anomaly of things not being right is Kang Seok-ju is a North Korean diplomat. He's been going around Europe, and that would never have ever happened in Kim Jong-il's time. You don't get diplomats going around countries like that, of his own.
그 외에도 여러 가지 징후들이 있으니까 조금 좀 인내해 보면 될 것 같습니다.
And there are plenty of signs I can share. So if we are all patient, we will see more.
Okay. Nothing as difficult as to predict the future. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very long day, a very special day for Leiden University, focused on the situation in North Korea with very special guests who gave us insight in the situation of North Korea. I would like to, on behalf of the city of Leiden, the mayor is here in front. I would like to invite you all, and all means not just you, but all people also watching through video screen, to come to the City Hall at 6 o'clock. The city of Leiden offers you a reception and drinks. And just follow the crowds, that way. So please feel very much welcome at the City Hall. Secondly, I would like to thank all the organizers of today's, Remco Breuker, especially the organizers of today's event, again, which has been very, very special. We have a thriving Korean Studies program, and we are very proud on that, and I think today's events are a showcase of what we are able to do here at Leiden with regard to Korea. Finally, I would like to thank our speaker, Dr. Jang, for his lecture, which was very interesting, but even more perhaps for so frankly and openly answering all our questions here at Leiden. I think it was very special for us. I would like to thank you very much for being here and sharing with us all your insights. So thank you very much.
Please stand up, please.
이게 측정해주는 건가요? 저는 저기 막 어디 못 알아듣겠어요.